Hey guys, what's up? Brian from PFC here. Just got back from Provo, Utah, where we did an event, the Let's See with Action Target up there. It was great, fantastic experience. Made a lot of new friends, taught a lot of good information. One of the things that was cool and frustrating at the same time was demonstrating the failure to extract to a lot of cops that were up there. And when we say the failure to extract, some folks on the handgun still call this a double feed. We'll talk about that in a moment. But we had a timed course of fire that we were running them through. We told them they could use whatever method they wanted to in order to take and clear that malfunction out. And when we demonstrated our method, our preferred method, we got a lot of hold on, wait a minute, and had to take and back up and then re-explain that. So this is a method, technique for taking and clearing this malfunction out. It's a pretty common malfunction that's taught in law enforcement circles, military circles. We've been doing it for well over a decade right now, and it's kind of crazy to us that it hasn't completely filtered down because of how much faster it is, much more efficient it is, better under stress, better while injured, all of the above. For the purposes of what we're going to talk about here, first we need to explain and show you guys exactly what the malfunction is that we're dealing with, what it looks like, etc. All right, so the malfunction in question we're talking about here, again, this is a failure to extract. In this case right here, I've got a viable live round that's in the chamber. We'll talk about why we're doing that in just a moment. And then I've put the magazine in after dropping that round into the chamber, muzzle down, and then gently ease the slide forward to apply that tension to the bullet. You can perform this and you can set this up with an empty casing, which is likely what it would be if you actually had the malfunction for real. Just make sure that you use casings that come from your gun because they've got that level of expansion that's consistent with your chamber. And again, this is a failure to extract, empty casing in the chamber that failed to get extracted from the chamber with a live viable round feeding in behind it. Now next up, what's commonly associated with that failure to extract is a double feed, a true double feed, which for the record on the handgun is exceedingly difficult for us to take and get in reality. The reason for that is the handgun, unlike a carbine magazine, even if it's a double stacked magazine, it tapers down to a single stack at the top. And so in essence, if we do get a double feed on the handgun, the overwhelming leading cause on that, aside from a bad magazine, which is rare, is because the user took and they blocked the ejection port with their hand while they were cycling the action, inhibiting the ability for that live round or that spent casing to get out of the gun. This is caused by the user if we do get this double feed. Okay, so regardless of which one we get, whether it's a double feed, failure to extract, whatever that is, the older the traditional methodology for taking and clearing this out is a 9-step process. Let's go ahead and go through that. So it begins with looking after they get that soft or that dead trigger and identifying the problem. Looking, locking, stripping that magazine clear from the weapon, and then working the action a total of 3 times, at which time they will access a fresh magazine, insert that fresh magazine, cycle the action, and then come back up on target and then reassess, looking for what the problem is. There's a multitude of issues with performing this traditional technique. The first one is it's 9 steps. 9 steps overall is going to be a lot of steps. That's difficult to remember. That's difficult to access under stress, and it's obviously it's going to be slower. Next, every single time we have students of middle range to lower range capability, when they take and are tasked with this without refresher training on it, just to access the skill from their previous training, they tend to get these steps out of sequence or miss some steps, and they do that wrong. So that's a problem right there. Next is compatibility with the manner in which we clear the weapon out. We know that if we're going to unload the gun, the first step in the unloading process is the removal of the source of ammunition. We remove the source of ammunition, and then we lock the working parts to the rear. If I'm locking working parts open before removing that magazine, I'm kind of violating some previously taught information right there. So we like to have cross-referencing or compatibility of one skill to the other. Next, giving credit to the end user, their mentality and their ability to identify what the problem truly is and when that problem has been cleared. If you think about just an emergency reload from lockback, we've hit lockback, our gun has gone empty, we've ejected an empty magazine, and we put a full magazine into the gun and we send the working parts forward. We don't send the working parts forward 2 more times to verify that we picked up a round. Why are we doing that with a malfunction just in the name of being absolutely certain and figuring out that it came out? The causes of this failure to extract or this double feed malfunction. Double feed, again, is user generated, And even if it's a bad mag, that's still user generated. You didn't replace your mags out. The failure to extract is caused by either a dirty or a over lubricated chamber. Okay, so that's again user. Next, it can be caused by the broken rim on an extractor. So rather the claw on the extractor. So if you can imagine the extractor claw, if that broke off, that's kind of like a man with no hands trying to pick up a full pickle bucket. He's got no hands, he's got no fingers, no claws with which to grab that and lift that. There's no way that's going to come out. It doesn't matter what technique you use. If you have a shorn off extractor claw, with the exception of punching the bore with a rod, you're not going to get that casing out of the gun. Next is if the rim of the casing itself has broken off. Again, this can come from substandard, crappy, reloaded garbage, bargain basement ammunition, gun show Ziploc bag ammunition. If that happens, you're not going to take and get that out. It's going to need to be rotted out. We can also have a full-on case separation where the back half of the case breaks off and then the sidewall or the barrel, so to speak, of the casing remains in the chamber. And again, that's going to require tools to take and get that out. So we got a lot of issues there. Another thing we see is with the requirement to perform 3 racks on the gun. We already identified that if it comes out on the first rack, why am I still continuing to rack it? But the insistence upon 3 racks has caused people to round corners off and actually do something that's ineffective, can further jam the gun, and it can actually wind up hurting themselves. What we mean by that is short racking. So the racks that are called for involve locking it open, stripping the magazine out, and then full compression racks, fully compressing the recoil spring and allowing the slide to go all the way forward. That's not what we see. What we see is some short action along those lines, where the slide is grasped, we block the ejection port, inhibiting the ability for the obstruction to drop free, and then we short rack the slide, not allowing full compression and release of the spring to aggressively snap over a stuck casing. And that's problematic. Kind of defeats the entire purpose of doing it in the first place. Another major shortcoming to the traditionally taught or the older method of taking and clearing this out is the hucking of that viable magazine. So I've got my malfunction on my gun right here. I get that dead or soft trigger. I look, I lock, I strip at that point. I huck that magazine away. I work. And in this case, I'm very, very fortunate. I'm very, very lucky that I have an additional magazine on my person. What if it's further along in the fight and I'm out of ammunition and I've hucked my last viable magazine? Or I'm a CCW carrier and the only magazine that I have is the one that was in the gun. And again, it is not typically the magazine that is the cause of this problem. I've now hucked all my ammunition away and I have a fully cleared out gun and I've got no ammunition. I'm going to wind up scrambling underneath the Taco Bell tables looking for those magazines at this point. So what's the answer? Lucky for us, we do in fact have one. It's so easy. It's preposterous. You'll kick yourself that you haven't adopted it sooner. And again, this isn't about passing qualifications or sticking with legacy techniques. It's about just being that much more efficient, effective in the fight and getting back up and running and helping our teammates or citizens out. Here's how this works from a locked slide open configuration with either a live round or a casing that is specifically from your gun, or with a dummy round. We're going to take which one of those 3. In this case, I have a casing from my gun, and I'm placing that down inside of the chamber. That's been inserted. Muzzle remains down, pointing in a safe direction. I'll take a viable magazine, insert that, and then ease the working parts forward. At that point, our failure to extract, double feed, whatever it is we're calling it, is set up on the gun. Remember this, RRR. RRR. That stands for rip, reinsert, and rack. I come up and I experience the dead trigger on the gun. The gun will not fire soft trigger. At that point, just as though I was going to perform an emergency reload on the gun, the first step and the fixing process initiates at the magazine. If I had a failure to fire, which is a click, the fix initiates at the magazine. So we're consistent across the board. That's another benefit. So again, soft or dead trigger, I will grasp the magazine, depressing the magazine release, and I will aggressively pull it clear of the gun. When I pull it clear, I pay attention, I take note as to whether or not the slide goes into battery. In this case, it did. If it did not, I would give it one simple rack, holding it to the rear with positive control, allowing any obstruction to drop free. In this case, it did go into battery. From there, we want to make sure we pull the magazine all the way clear of the magazine well to allow any obstruction to drop out. On Sig Sauers, it's very, very common that loose round will be inside the magazine well and need to drop clear. On Glocks, it's typical that the top round on the magazine just walks off a little bit on the gun. That can either be pushed back on, flicked off, or we can even just go with it the way it is and see what happens. Let's go ahead and try that. Ripping that clear, reinsert that magazine, aggressively cycle that action and come up on target, and then reassess whether or not we have a threat or the threat area has changed. Rip, reinsert, and then rack. And again, there's a step in the middle in the event that the slide doesn't go into battery, which would be the addition of a single rack in the middle. Let's go ahead and set that up and try that again. So here we are set up again, failure to extract, and I will do this in a right-handed fashion this time. Again, coming up and experiencing that dead trigger, pulling the gun back into my workspace, depressing the magazine, rip. You can see that as I ripped it off, the magazine came clear, the slide went back into battery, and my bullet is just slightly off of the magazine. Reinsert aggressively, rack the action, come back up, and then reassess the area. It worked, and in this case, that was performed with a live round in the chamber as opposed to a casing in the chamber. Let's go ahead and set up that double feed now that is typically user-generated or user-caused. Okay, so now we've got that double feed that was caused by me being a knucklehead and blocking the ejection port. It is a true double feed in this case right now. Again, not something we typically see in nature. We're going to clear it the exact same way, though. I'm going to come up on target. I experience the dead trigger, and I rip. You can see when I rip the magazine clear, in this case, the slide did not go all the way into battery. This is going to cause the addition of that middle step. I'm diagnosing along the way. So rip, I'm going to simply pull that slide to the rear, allow the obstruction to drop, reinsert, and rack. So instead of rip, reinsert, rack, that was rip, rack, reinsert, rack. We just had to add that one little step in the middle. Again, that's the rarer of the two varieties, and that's caused by the user. That's a user-generated problem. The holy grail of malfunction clearance on the handgun is clearing the failure to extract, or what's sometimes called the double feed. We're set up again, and that's clearing it one-handed while injured, particularly on the left-hand side. This will cause some officers to take as long as a minute or two. They're using the back of their leg, they're using their boot heel, they're doing all kinds of craziness. We have a method that can get this cleared out one-handed and get the gun back up in less time than it takes to perform the 9-step traditional method two-handed. And why we wouldn't want to adopt that, I have no clue. This is called the inertia method. And the way that this works is I'm going to come up. In this case, my right arm is down. It's injured. It's completely out of the fight. We'll put that in my pocket here. So I'm going to come up. I'm going to experience that dead or that soft trigger. With the leading edge of my forearm, the bottom edge of my forearm, I'm going to strike that against either my knee or against a hardened object while depressing the magazine release. So that will look like so. Depressing that mag release. The magazine is out at that point. So the strip portion is complete. I'll come back, reholster the gun. A fresh magazine will get inserted into the gun. The gun comes back out. Rear sight or ejection port is notched onto the kit. Cycle the action just like so. Come back up on target, and then we'll reassess for threats. That can also be performed in a two-handed method as well, but it does forfeit a magazine. So now we'll demonstrate that two-handed method utilizing inertia by striking that forearm against my opposite side forearm and then going for a fresh magazine from there. So I come up, I experience that dead trigger, simply eject that magazine, fresh magazine's in, cycle the action, and we come back up on target and we're cleared. Again, still the same 3 steps. It still is rip, reinsert, or reinsert a fresh magazine, and then rack. That one forfeited a magazine, but it can be done mighty fast. All right, so now we're set up to take and do a little side-by-side of our 2 techniques. We're gonna film 2 runs. I'm gonna go for broke on both runs at maximum speed, and we'll play these two options side by side and let you see the difference at which time the gun is cleared, back up, and running. In closing, we'll say a few words. You can use whatever technique you want to clear this problem out, but as they say on TV and in commercials, results may vary. If we have a qualification course that incorporates malfunctions or refunctioning, as we like to say, of the gun into it, and the qual is built to allow enough time to get that cleared, that's a completely different strategy than rewarding the individual shooter for clearing it quicker or using a technique that is reliable, which this is, across the board, and just getting it cleared out and getting the gun back up and in the fight that much faster. We encourage you to not believe any of the data we just showed you. We encourage you not believe anything we said and take and go out and run this for yourself. Try it on 1911s, try it on SIGs, HKs, M&Ps, Glocks, et cetera, across the board, and you're going to be mighty surprised at what the given results are. If that doesn't convince you, there's another way, and it is it's painful, but it works. Take 2 shooters and set them up with simunitions or UTMs. Set up the same malfunction, that failure to extract, and have them face one another, obviously face protection. On the go command, have them both attempt to fire, and one shooter utilizing the old technique that is 9 steps, and the other shooter utilizing this more streamlined version of 3 steps, clear that out as fast as they can. And as soon as they have their guns back up and running, they're allowed to begin engaging each other. Our shooter with the 3 steps is going to begin unloading bullet after bullet and even multiple magazines into the other shooter to really just illustrate how long, slow, and inefficient the technique is. Everything evolves. Equipment evolves, communication evolves, firearms technology evolves, and also methodology, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Give this one a try. We think you guys will find it very, very interesting. Be safe out there.